A verdict of obedience of the Sharia court on a disobedient Muslim wife. This is a love story that was written in English and translated into Arabic by Dr. A. Ahmed. Copyright. All rights are reserved. All characters in this book are fictitious, and any resemblance to real people, living or dead, is purely coincidental. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author except by a reviewer who may quote brief paragraphs in a review to be printed in a newspaper, magazine, school journal, or university article. This story is about 3 Muslim girls who were subjected to gross injustice, severe violence, and abhorrent persecution by Muslim men, religious leaders, Sharia court judges, and police officers in the Islamic community and the religion of Islam and its misogynistic and abusive teachings against women's rights, which are innumerable. For example, beating of women, child marriage, circumcision of the private parts of Muslim girls, which is known as female genital mutilation or FGM, slaying them in honor killings, inequality between males and females in inheritance, testimony in court, marriage, divorce, men's guardianship over women, controlling their lives and destinies as if they are minors, physically handicapped or mentally retarded, and forcing them to wear the hijab, niqab, or the humiliating burqa as if they are scary ghosts. Muslim men are allowed by the Quran to have sex or rather rape without the need for marriage captive women of war such as wives, daughters, sisters, and even mothers of the defeated enemies who are called unclean infidels such as Jews, Christians, Hindus, atheists, etc. Islam forbids a Muslim woman to become a president of a country or a boss at work or a judge in court, and she is strictly forbidden to lead men or women in prayer as an imama. Moreover, the Prophet Muhammad said the woman is an unclean creature just like a dog and a donkey, and therefore as a defiled being she annuls the man's prayer if she passes in front of him while he is praying. The Quran likens the woman to the human feces, which both spoils the man's ablution or religious cleansing. Many Islamic countries prevent women from going to school and work, and they are not permitted to drive cars, bicycles, or motorbikes. They are forbidden to practice any kind of sports, and they are not allowed to go to gymnastics, beaches, or swimming pools, cinemas, or theaters, and none of them is allowed to leave the house without her husband or with a muharram man. The woman is forbidden to marry such as her father or brother. They are also not allowed to fall in love with men before marriage or choose their future husbands or life partners. The story is about the 3 innocent Muslim girls, Intisar, Firdaus, and Mona. Chapter 49. The fugitive wife takes refuge in a military house. As soon as she entered the military base, the homeless and fleeing girl Intisar lost consciousness and fell to the ground as if she had been shot in the head from close range. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself in the military hospital. She saw 2 nurses in military uniforms standing by her bed. She smiled at these 2 nurses, but they did not smile at her. She recalled the entire incident of being chased by the angry mob who considered her to be a zombie girl arose from her grave after her death. She knows she broke military rules the way she entered. Wherefore, Intisar expected that she would be imprisoned for such a crime. The 2 nurses immediately transferred the intruder girl, who had entered the military base illegally, to their top military commander. The 2 nurses saluted the major and then left. When the homeless girl entered barefoot, the major looked at her seriously, his eyes scanning her from the top of her head to the bottom of her feet. "What's your name?" Major asks aloud. "Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir," the fugitive girl answers in soft voice. "How old are you?" 17 years. "What is your problem?" Intisar hesitated to tell the major about her real problem, for fear of exposing her identity and sending her to the police. She kept silent. "Did you know you weren't supposed to enter this military base?" "Yes, sir, I knew that. But I had to do it." "Did you know you were supposed to be shot in the doorway?" "Yes, I know that, sir." "If you don't tell me the truth about yourself, I will hand you over to the police." "Please, sir, don't do that because I'm a pray girl." "Why did those angry citizens chase you?" "I don't know, sir." Did you steal something or fall into disgrace? I mean to say, did you commit adultery with a man and become pregnant with an unlawful child before marriage? I did none of these evil deeds. Then tell me what your problem is. I can't tell you about my problem. In that case, I must call the cops and hand you over to them. The mention of the police caused Intisar's body to shiver and her heart to quiver, so she opened her mouth and told the major her sad story, complete from A to Z. As she told the story of her tragic life, her tears fell like heavy raindrops in mid-autumn. Her many tears convinced the major that she had told the truth. Listen, young lady. Whatever you said about yourself, I believed it. But you broke the law by running away from your Muslim husband, the police, and your house. Firstly, if I have to remain silent, I will break the law myself. Secondly, you entered here in this military base illegally. You have committed this second grave crime. Therefore, I have no choice but to send you to the police. Please, sir, don't send me to the police. I didn't make a mistake. Please have mercy on me, and I promise I will never go near this military base again. Why did you break the law and run into our base? I was chased by many people who wanted to stone me to death. They mistook me for a zombie girl, a boogie woman, or a ghost. If I had not entered the military base, the angry crowd would have killed me. So please, kind sir, try to understand my problem and let me go. I did not do any crime in my life except that I fell in love with a rich boy and I want to be his future wife. When Intisar spoke these words, she fell at the major's feet and kissed them. Major bent down and raised her. Suppose, Miss Intisar, that I agree to let you go without handing you over to the police, and then tell me how you will solve your problem. You said you had no money, no shelter, no relatives in this big city. You also said that you spent 2 days wandering aimlessly around this cosmopolitan city. Khartoum is the most dangerous city in Sudan for a beautiful girl like you. Where are you going from here? I don't know, dear sir. But it would be better for me to wander the streets than to go to jail. I wonder if my wife will agree to keep you with her. Anyway, let's try that and send you home. Are you interested in doing housework as a maid? Of course, I will pay you for your service. Yes, I am willing to do anything for your wife. I have one important condition. If you want to stay in my house as a maid, you must not tell anyone your problem. Neither my wife nor my sons. I will not tell anyone. Then the major took his phone and called one of the military truck drivers. And when he came, he ordered him to take the new maid to his house. Major Alsanasni's house is located on the bank of the Nile River. It is very far from the military base. The vehicle that took the homeless girl is a large military truck. The employed maidservant has been traveling for a long time before she got to her new dwelling. Intisar enjoyed seeing the beautiful landscape of large green trees on both sides of the riverbank. Close to it, through the window glass, she can see fishermen repairing their nets and boats in the murky waters of the river. Some of the boats have already reached the other riverbank while others are still sailing towards the shore. Intisar wished in her heart that one day she would be able to travel on a boat. She has never traveled on a ship on the Red Sea or the Nile River before. By then her mind had forgotten the attempted rape in the brothel of the pimp Lady Nafisa and the frightful night she had spent in the cemetery. Fears of being raped by the big fat man or killed by stoning by the angry mob had vanished from her heart, too. Intisar sitting near the soldier driving the military truck. He is a tall, very handsome young man. He's whistling a famous Sudanese song while driving the big military truck. The beautiful young woman looked at him from the corner of her left eye, and she remembered her handsome boyfriend, Sammy. She knows that her good-looking lover will be released after a month in prison. Sulla told her that her lover had been sentenced to 1 month in prison. She also expected that the lawyer Sulla would come to look for her at the Stars Hotel near the international airport, where she had spent 4 days. So, Intisar decided to call the hotel front desk and give them her new address at the residence of the honorable military major who had agreed to put her in his house. The fugitive girl hopes that the noble major will help her and her lover escape from their country and immigrate to a Western country. When her imagination reached this happy end, the truck stopped at the gate of the major's house. The driver jumped down, circled the truck, and then opened the high door for her. Intisar got down slowly and carefully for fear of falling from the high truck. The soldier took her hand and helped her down. An armed guard approached them with a large machine gun in his right hand and a large dog in his left hand. The new maidservant started to shiver when she saw the huge brute. The handsome soldier who had brought her knew why she was so afraid and so told the guard to take his fearsome dog aside. Then Intisar stood behind the driver. The guard held his dog while the driver and the new girl advanced towards the gate. Once inside the gate, Intisar saw a woman standing halfway between the house and the gate. She is a tall, skinny woman with an angry face. She put her hands on her waist and appeared as a lady about to get into a fight. The driver approached the woman and said to her, "Good evening, Mrs. Sansone." The woman remained silent. "My dear madam, this is your new maidservant. Her name is Intisar Ibrahim." The new maid saw that the woman's ugly face was getting very angry without knowing a specific reason for it. The wife's hostile face revealed to her maidservant that she would not have a pleasant time at the major's house. She has to deal with a huge dog the size of a tiger and a wife as dangerous as a cobra. "Where did you come from?" Mrs. Senesnes asked angrily. "From the city of Gedaref," the new maid answered fearfully. "What kind of work do you want to do here?" "Anything you want me to do, I will do for you, madam." "Then follow me." Intisar followed the woman alone. The soldier driver got back into his truck and drove away. As she walked behind the tall and ugly wife, the beautiful maid began to admire the beauty of the house. They passed many large rooms. The homeless girl wished in her heart to allocate one of these spacious rooms for her. They kept walking until they reached the last room. When they entered, Intisar knew that they were in the kitchen. Then the ugly wife of Major Alsancini stood in the middle of the kitchen and put her hands on her waist, facing the beautiful new maidservant. She is about to start her instructions, but suddenly her small eyes notice Intisar's feet. "Where's your shoes?" The woman screams angrily. Before Intisar could answer her, the angry wife answered her own question. "This means that my husband found you wandering the streets and offered you a job. Am I right?" "No, madam. I'm not a street girl. I am from a good family. But circumstances have forced me to wander aimlessly through the streets of Khartoum City for the past 2 days." "What are the conditions? Did you run away from your home?" "Yes, madam. Of course, I know why. You have filled your womb with shame. Because of that shame, your father wanted to kill you. Most likely, this was the reason that prompted you to run away from home." "This is not true, madam." "Then tell me what made you run away from your house and wander the streets?" "It's a long story. I told your husband and he believed me. He is so even if a bitch comes up to him and tells him I'm a good woman, he'll believe her." Before Intisar could respond to the aforementioned false accusation, the enraged woman made another discovery about her new maid. So, she came forward and touched her dress and said sarcastically, "Now tell me, street girl, where did you get that expensive dress?" "An evil woman gave it to me. She tried to trick me into being a prostitute, but I ran away from her house when someone tried to rape me in my sleep at night." "And that woman didn't care about your bare feet? Or did she think it was the new fashion for her to send you out through the streets without shoes to fool foolish men like my husband?" "Believe me, madam, I am a good girl and morally well behaved. You will find out when I stay with you. At any rate, I will discuss it with my husband when he gets home. Now I want to give you orders. First of all, you should know that I am a very strict woman. I am a soldier's wife. I hate disobedience and filth. Filth of both kinds, physical and immoral. I will never tolerate seeing you do anything dirty in this house. You must be clean and tidy if you want to stay here." "I will always be neat and tidy, madam." Now about ethical behavior. First of all, you should know that I have 2 sons of the same age as you. One 18 years old and the other 16 years old. They are morally good boys and they are doing well in their studies. In addition to them, I have my husband. If any immoral talk, look, or behavior comes from you, or others, I will strike you and send you out of the house at once. I know you have some beauties on your face and body which you may try to use to entice the good men of this house. I did not like the beauty of your face and shape of body the moment I saw you. If any man in this house smiles at you, don't smile at him. If he invites you to his room, do not enter. Keep yourself away from them. I will never tolerate any love affairs between a maid and gentleman in this house. If I happen to go out of the house, you should not be surprised if I lock you with a big padlock inside your room and I carry the key with me. I believe in the saying that advises people to separate the egg from the stone and the female from the male. I will not contest your decisions, ma'am. We will now move on to the labor laws or your job descriptions. Do you know how to read and write? Yes, madam. I completed my 10th grade in the higher secondary school for girls in Gadara City. I don't care what you have accomplished in your studies, but the most important thing is to follow your rules and regulations very strictly. Yes, I will follow them. Can you take the pen and notebook over there? The new maid, Intisar, followed Mrs. Sinusny's first instructions, took the notebook and pen, and waited for the dictation. Law number 1. I have to be in the kitchen from 6 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. The new maid wrote the unjust first law and waited for the second. Law number 2. I am not allowed to sit, lie down, or relax on any chair, sofa, or bed, or watch television, or listen to the radio or tape recorder during my 15 working hours. The maidservant wrote the unfair second law and waited for the third. Law number 3. I shall make breakfast, cook lunch and dinner, wash the clothes of the whole family, wash the bed sheets, pillowcases, and tablecloths, clean all the utensils, sweep the dust, then sweep rooms and corridors, pour water on flowers, roses, and other plants, iron clothes, go to the market, and do any other work that need required. The new maid wrote the third inhuman law and sadly awaited the fourth. Law number 4. I have no right to mix with any member of the Sinusny's family. This means I am not authorized under any circumstances to sit and dine with members of the noble family. Intisar also wrote the Slavery Act number 4 and waited for the next one. Now write your name, note the date, and sign the contract. The new maid wrote her full name, then dated and signed the contract and handed it over to Mrs. Sinusny for approval. The noble wife read the contract after she wrote the date and added her signature to it. During Intisar's return to her chair, the stern woman made a new discovery about her new maid, which made her scream as if she saw Satan in the form of a human female. Take off this dress. I don't want to see you in that short, nasty dress again. This dress is designed for Abyssinian prostitutes and Western movie actresses of the Christian infidels. But, madam, I have no other dress. Go to the bathroom and get rid of that dirty dress. I will give you my dress to put on until I have decent clothes for you. Okay, ma'am, I will remove it in the bathroom. After that, Mrs. Sinusny grabbed the maid's hand and dragged her into the bathroom. Then she went and fetched a lot of clothes from her wardrobe. The maid tried on all the clothes, but none of them fit her. Each dress is either too small or too long for her. The soldier's wife is a thin woman, like a tuberculosis patient. So, Mrs. Sinusny had to let her beautiful maid Intisar spend the first day in her holy house in her sexy dress. But she promised again and again that she would buy her a good dress the next morning. Chapter 50. The Runaway Wife in a House of Slavery. When the so-called disobedient Muslim wife arrived at the house of Major al-Sanusi, most of the duties had already been done by the mistress of the house herself. Wherefore, the hardworking wife of the major said that her new maid had nothing to do that day but wash and iron a few clothes and other house linen. However, when the mean woman collected the clothes, the linens, blankets, the bed sheets, the mattress covers, the pillowcases, and the tablecloths, Intisar concluded in her mind that if she had to work continuously without stopping, she would not finish washing half of them in a week. So, the new maidservant asked the stern woman to excuse her from washing piles of clothes that day because she was too tired, and to give them to a laundry shop instead. To a laundry shop? Why did you come here? To eat, sleep, urinate, and defecate? As if you are in a luxury hotel on your honeymoon with your handsome groom. Listen, Miss World. If you don't want to wash these few clothes and linens, you should get out of this house immediately. Well, madam, I will wash and iron them. But can you divide them into 7 piles for me? Then I will work every day on one com. What did you say? 7 days to wash and iron those few clothes? Listen, street girl, I'm a soldier's wife. I believe in discipline and hard work. I myself work as an unpaid maidservant from morning to evening. I take a rest, not for 1 hour. So, if you don't want to work hard in this house, find another place to work. Well, madam, I'll wash them. But do you have a washing machine? I haven't even seen what a washing machine looks like. Your hands are the washing machine and iron. But, madam, how can I finish them today? Look at the piles that have piled up and you've collected them for me. I need many days to finish them. Not several days. In a few hours you can finish them all. Personally, I can finish them in a couple of hours. You have a lot of time today. No need to cook food or clean rooms. I did all that before you came to this house. From 6 p.m. now to 12 midnight you have 6 hours to work. It's long enough for you. Because your work started today at 6 p.m., I extended it until 12 at midnight. From tomorrow, you will work from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. You must work 12 hours a day and have 3 hours in between for having your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I will calculate this day for you as half a day and pay you accordingly. You better start now and not waste my time and yours arguing the difference. I still have a lot of work to do. When Mrs. Alsanusny imposed the first assignment or duty on her new maid, she left the bathroom while walking as if she was a military soldier on her evening duty. Intisar stood among the piles of clothes and began to contemplate her life. She faced two difficult choices. Which is better for her, either to return to the streets and eventually turn into a prostitute and a whore for many men, or to stay in Mrs. Sinusny's house and become a slave girl. So, she is again in a serious dilemma. It is more difficult than the one she faced early in the morning that day when she was forced to choose death between the bullets of the soldiers or the stones of the mob. She understood that death would be much better than slavery and prostitution. Thus, Intisar found herself contemplating suicide for the first time in her miserable life. Once again, she remembered the prophetic words of the Imam at the Grand Mosque, which is better for you to be the wife of one man or the woman of many men. How was his prophecy immediately fulfilled on her life, a prophecy that must have been inspired by Satan? As soon as the Imam entered his new Mercedes car and left her parked in front of the largest house of God in Sudan, Satan sent that pimp lady Mother Nafisa, who took her to a brothel and tried to turn her into a prostitute available for prostitution to many men. She wanted to make her a high-ranking whore for sale and sex to many rich old men. When Intisar's mind was preoccupied with these dark thoughts, she suddenly heard Mrs. Alsanusny screaming in her ears. "Start your job right away, lazy and dirty girl. If you don't start now, I'm going to come into the bathroom and make you regret that you came to work here." The new maid became very afraid of the angry woman, so she started washing clothes. Intisar continued washing piles of clothes continuously for 3 hours. At exactly 9 o'clock, Mrs. Alsanusny burst into the bathroom and ordered her to go to the kitchen and prepare dinner for the members of the noble family. The new maid felt great relief from the constant torture of washing dirty clothes nonstop. She immediately got up and headed towards the kitchen. When she reached the big kitchen, she found the angry woman had placed a large tray with many dishes. At every step of preparing dinner, the stern woman shouted at her new maid. She wasted 20 minutes scolding the inexperienced maid, correcting her, and pushing her aside every time because of her many mistakes. The serious woman then told her new maid to wait 5 minutes and then bring the tray to the dining hall. The noble wife thought that it was below her level and dignity that her husband and 2 sons saw her walking with the lowly maid whom she considered dirtier than her own filth and excrement. Intisar waited for 5 minutes to pass before daring to show her face to the noble sons. Because of 3 hours of hard work, the maid's back was bent. She tried to straighten her body by herself, but she couldn't. Then she picked up the heavy tray and walked towards the dining hall. The heavy weight of the tray caused her to bend even more. This position made her appear sexually attractive to any male who might see her. If she approached him with her face, he could clearly see half of her big breasts through the collar of her pretty dress. If she gets close to him with her back, he can see her wet dress clinging to her big and sexy buttocks. Such a dangerous temptation had escaped the attention of the stern wife, who said she hated the immoral relationship between a beautiful and sexy maid and the noble males of her holy abode. The dress was intentionally designed by the lady pimp, Nafis's tailor, to be used by a beautiful young woman of her 5 adopted daughters to lure rich old men into fornication with them. And then they must pay the pimp lady whatever amount of money she will charge her wealthy clients. Meanwhile, in the dining hall, they sit around a large table with the major, his soldier-like wife, and their 2 teenage boys. The 2 sons sit on one side opposite the entrance, and the husband and wife sit across from them. "How's your new maid?" Major Alsanusny asks happily and enthusiastically. Mrs. Alsanusny replied angrily, "I am not happy with her presence in the house." "What's wrong with her?" "She is young and strong. Besides, she needs shelter and work." "I am not worried about her age and strength. I don't like her face." "What did you say, Mom?" The 16-year-old son asks his mother. The 18-year-old son said, "Once again you brought an ugly face into the house." "A female face that looks like an ape again? I can't believe that ugly girl left our house." "Yet, Mother, I have a terrible nightmare when I remember the face of our last maid," says the 16-year-old son. "As if you brought them from the zoo." The first maidservant was like a chimpanzee, the second girl was like a dog's mouth, and the third woman was a pig, and this new maid would look uglier than a gorilla or an African elephant. "Why don't you bring a girl with a normal human face?" says the youngest son. "Why should our Sudanese maids be brought from the Nuba Mountains, Darfur region, and South Sudan? Is it possible to bring an Arab girl from Eastern or Northern Sudan, or from the Jazeera Governorate?" says the eldest son. "Hassan and Hussein, I am your mother, and I know what is best for you. Those previous girls were my choice, but this new maid is your father's choice, and I don't like her face because it doesn't qualify her to be a maidservant." Before the 2 sons could ask their mother for an explanation, they heard a soft and gentle female voice saying, "May I come in?" Hassan and Hussein looked at each other and then looked at the doorway. Their father said eagerly, "Can you come in, dear Intisar, and you can join us for dinner?" "Why did she have to make such an annoying sound before entering?" Mrs. Sinasny asks angrily. The 2 teenage boys first saw the large tray of food, and a face of disbelief followed them when they saw it. With each step the new maid took towards them, their erections increased by degrees. Their eyes are fixed on her beautiful face and her half-visible breasts. Their father is the first to stand up. He rushed after the new maid, pulled out a chair, and offered her a seat. The father saw her big buttocks first and was thus influenced by the erotic stream first. The 2 sons also reached out and took the large tray from the beautiful new maid. Then they asked her to sit down and join them at the dinner table. That's not all. The younger son took a plate and served food to their beautiful and sexy maid. The ugly mother could not stand it anymore and thus became very angry. "Stand up, you stupid girl," the angry woman shouted. "You're here to serve us, not for my husband and sons to serve you. Didn't I tell you that your place is in the kitchen? How do you sit here with your noble masters and also want to dine with us?" The maid, Intisar, jumped out of the chair as if she had discovered a poisonous cobra moving under her seat. Then she ran to the kitchen as if she was being chased by a Muslim female terrorist carrying an explosive device. "Didn't I tell you, Alsanusny, that this girl is not fit to be a maid in this house? You have seen with your own eyes the effect of her face on your sons. If you want to destroy and spoil your teenage boy's good manners, let her stay here." "My dear wife Fatima, I told you this girl is homeless and without money. I can't send her to the streets. Why don't you give her a chance? In that case, you must send these 2 boys to a boarding school before she corrupts them morally and makes them commit adultery with her." "Mom, how can she spoil us when we look at her as a mere housemaid?" the younger son asks. The older son says she seems to be a good and well-mannered girl. "Yes, my brother is right," Hussein says. "She looks like an angel," Hassan says. "Have you ever seen an angel?" the mother asks her older son angrily. "No, Mama, not at all. But I think today I saw an angelic face. Look, they started calling her angel today, and tomorrow they'll call her Miss World. They just annoy you. I know they are both morally good boys and they know what their limits are. My beloved mother, we will treat her like a sister." The father says happily, "You're a good-mannered boy, my son. Sanusi, I will put all the blame on you if anything goes wrong. I'm sure nothing bad will happen to our 2 sons." My husband, Al-Sanusni, the wife says loud, I believe in the Sudanese saying you should separate the egg from the stone and the female from the male. Yes, my wife, Fatima, I know that the new maid, Intisar, is very beautiful, a young teenager, and also very sweet. But what's wrong with being a pretty girl? Being a beautiful woman is not a crime. Beauty is a virtue and a blessing from God, which he gives to the women he loves. Mr. Sanusni's last words caused his ugly and skinny wife to rise from the table without eating her supper. Then she exited in rage out of the dining room and went to the kitchen. There she found the new maid, Intisar, sitting crying. What are you doing here, lazy girl? You are a disobedient maidservant. You should be in the bathroom doing your work by now. The pretty maid quickly developed a great fear of the major's ugly wife. When she sees her angry face or hears her coarse voice, she feels like a cobra is approaching her. Therefore, Intisar immediately got up and fled to the bathroom as if she was being chased by the devil's wife with pitchfork in her hands. She started washing again. An hour later, the cobra woman came to her terrified maid and ordered her to go and clean the dishes in the kitchen. While she was cleaning the dishes, the maid received the sad news that she would not have dinner as punishment for breaking an important law. Intisar appealed to the cobra woman with tears. She said she was starving because she had not eaten any food that day. However, the cobra woman said that orders must be obeyed without question. The alleged disobedient maid spent another hour in the bathroom, and then the rude woman, acting like a conscript soldier, told her that her duty for the day was over. It was 12:30 in the middle of the night when the new slave girl Intisar left the bathroom. When she got to her feet, she couldn't stand up straight. Her back was completely bent. Her feet have become crooked, too. Her head hurts. Her stomach is empty. She felt nauseous. She can't stand without propping herself up against a wall. Nevertheless, the cruel wife grabbed her hand and pulled her out. Then she dragged her like an animal into the pantry and told her that it would be her bedroom. Then she went out and closed the door behind her. Her new slave, Intisar, is left alone to face another horrible night with rats, cockroaches, mosquitoes, and other bloodsuckers of the night insects. The imprisoned maid can hear the cruel wife of the major walking away like a soldier on her night shift. Then the new maidservant, who had been transformed into a despicable slave, began to tremble from the fear of being alone in her place, which was similar to her dark dungeon, as if she was an outcast young woman in Hindu society. She is very tired and hungry now. She looked around to see her new abode. The storeroom is intended for storing old things such as broken furniture, children's toys when the two brothers used to play with them when they were young, and the major's military equipment. It's very small. It has a horrible stink. Besides, it has very dim light. The frightened maid does not feel alone in this little grave. Rats and mosquitoes make enough noise to keep her up all night. Intisar does not care that there are millions of mosquitoes. Her city, Gadarif, is known for its billions of blood-sucking insects, especially mosquitoes. But her fear was caused by the presence of mice. She believes that rats can eat human flesh when they are hungry. So, the terrified maid spent the first hour sitting and watching in all directions. However, due to her fatigue, she felt very sleepy. She struggled with her sleep and her fatigue for a while. But at last fatigue and sleepiness overcame her, and she fell asleep on the floor. She has no bed, mattress, pillow, or blanket. She is sleeping now like a tree trunk without dreaming or moving. At 3 o'clock that morning, the door to sleeping maid Intisar's little storeroom was opened from the outside. A tall, dark silhouette of a man crept into her darkened room. He is like a thief in the night. Then he closed the small door again. In the dim light, the dark human figure moved like a black ghost and stood in front of the sexy body of the beautiful new maid. Then he turned off the light. The small room turned into pitch darkness like a tomb. Intisar, like an innocent lamb, she sleeps without knowing that there is another humanoid beast very close to her. The thief reached out his hands and started to feel her sexy body. She is sleeping on her stomach. Her tight, short, sexy dress is still wet and sticks to her big buttocks. The man sensed her seductive body and continued enjoying it for a while. Then he moved his right hand from her buttocks and extended his hand to one of her breasts. His left hand is still moving on the big wet ass from one buttock to the other one. His right hand moved to her soft lips and began to feel them lustfully. Then he moved his lips and started kissing her cheeks. In the meantime, his hands moved from one sensitive and sexy area to the other. Intisar is in a deep sleep and does not feel the caress and pressure of her body. She is dead tired and her body is dormant. The lustful man is in a hurry. Therefore, he folded the maid's dress until it reached her stomach. He quickly pulled her red swimsuit-like underwear from her hairy pussy and big buttocks until it reached her knees. Then he took off his clothes and mounted her body. As he began forcing his large erect dick inside her virgin pussy, the third innocent girl's sleeping body awoke. At first, the new maid thought that an evil spirit was attacking her in her sleep through a terrible nightmare. She thought that she was still in the house of the pimp Lady Mother Nafisa and that she was being brutally raped by the fat man who was trying to rape her again. Then she soon remembered that she had run away from the brothel and was now working as a maidservant in the good major's house. When she felt his big cock insert a small part of it into her circumcised pussy, she woke up and screamed in terror. He quickly put his hand over her mouth and muffled her scream. Now she is fully awake. Intisar understands that he is a human male, not a ghost. The man tries to rape her, desecrate her pure body, and take away her virginity. She struggled under his strong and heavy body. Her female physical strength is far inferior to his male physical strength. She tried to scream for help again, but her voice could not come out through her tongue, teeth, and lips because his strong hand was covering her mouth. Intisar knew her struggle to stay afloat was over. So, she surrendered and handed over her body to the man to rape and defile it and steal her virginity. She began to cry for her purity and honor. She felt that the rapist was forcefully forcing his big dick inside her virgin cunt like a saw or a sharp knife cutting her in half. In those decisive moments in the life of the third, innocent girl, Intisar, the door opened violently from outside, and the cobra woman jumped inside and roared like an angry lioness who found her lion fucking another lioness. Sanusi, shame on you. I know you only brought her up for this shameful adultery with her. If you do not stop your dirty and abominable deed, I will scream and wake your sons Hassan and Hussein and ask them with the armed guards to come and see you in this shameful sight. The adulterous major slowly and timidly rolled off the maid's naked body and stood up. With his head bowed down, he crept out of the dark little storeroom. Intisar felt as if she was raped by a wild beast. She became like a broken female animal. She also felt like a doggy bitch raped by a wild dog on the hard floor. She moved slowly with her brutally raped body and got to her feet and waited for the angry cobra woman to attack and kill her. Then she lifted her red panties from her knees up and covered her raped hairy pussy and pushed down her wrap dress and looked with frightened eyes at the dangerous woman. Her eyes are filled with tears and fear. Then the new maid began to cry and beg for mercy from the cruel wife. Do you have the guts to cry and beg for forgiveness, you filthy bitch? Get out of this house, you whore and street slut, before I call the guards with their 2 dangerous dogs. You must leave my house immediately. I don't want to see your dirty face in this house again. You are the wife of Satan who has come here to destroy my married life and spoil the good name of my husband, the proud Major Sinasni. My good-natured husband had never before committed such a disgraceful act of adultery with any other maid. You seduced him alone with your seductive dress and half-naked body and made him commit adultery with you. You did that because you wanted him to leave me and divorce me as his good and pure wife, then marry you. You are a dirty and unclean street bitch. Before Intisar could defend herself and tell the angry wife that it was not her fault and that it was also not her prior overstepping or her intention to seduce her husband to commit adultery with her and marry her as a second wife or as a rival to her, the cobra wife assaulted her and grabbed her by the hair. Then she began to pull violently at her long hair as if she wanted to break the maid's neck. Intisar screamed even louder when the cruel woman forced her out the door by literally pulling her hair. In this inhuman and cruel manner, the major's wife dragged her new maid or her slave girl out of the little storeroom. When they reached the outer gate, the outraged wife let go of her hair. Then she spit in her face and kicked her with her shoe on her back until the maid fell upside down and injured herself. That done, the Cobra woman cried angrily, "Guards, if this dirty bitch comes back here again, feel free to shoot her in the head with your guns, or let your ferocious dogs attack her and eat her alive." Chapter 51. The latest manifestation of the fairy, Aljanaya, the beautiful bride of the Nile. The so-called disobedient, homeless, and fugitive Muslim wife, the third innocent girl, Intisar, stood at a distance from the home of her second rapist, Major Al-Sanusi, not knowing where to go in such early hours of the morning. The new day is still as dark as the previous midnight. Her raped and abused body is in pain from the top of her head to the bottom of her feet. Her heart bleeds from the traumatic experience of a second attempted rape by the Major. She still remembers the painful first rape attempt by the fat human monster Bulbul Wad al-Bala, the son of the Prophet's neighbor in the brothel of the evil pimp Nafisa. Her hair is frizzy and her face is swollen due to the painful slaps she received from the cruel woman, Mrs. Al-Sinasni, before expelling her from her residence, which is subject to armed guards and voracious dogs. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, as her watch showed, and it's still dark and cold. Intisar looked all around her. She saw the Nile River not far from her. She saw the residences of the rich extended along the riverbank. She knows what will happen to her if she knocks on the door of any house at that time. She would be accused of being a homeless street prostitute or a burglar girl, or would be mistaken for a demonic incarnation of some sort and shot and killed. Intisar decides to go to the river instead. Her experience of the few nights she spent on the streets of Khartoum City had taught her that the wilderness of savage animals and poisonous insects and cemeteries of the dead, zombies, and ghosts are less dangerous than human dwellings. At least the earlier creatures would not rape, abuse, and enslave her, while the latter creatures had beaten, raped, deceived, and enslaved her, and tried to stone her to death and turn her into a whore and a slave girl paid for adultery and slavery at a cheap price. They also looted her bag, stole her money and shoes, expelled her outside her city, deprived her of shelter, food, her family, her freedom, and love, and separated her from her lover and imprisoned him as a criminal. Therefore, Intisar preferred to go to the river and find a solution to her intractable problem than to seek help from her selfish and dangerous fellow humans. Once again, the runaway wife discovered that her feet had no shoes. She walked aimlessly and barefoot for some time on the muddy riverbank with cold and dirty mud until she came across some fishermen's boats. She looked around but didn't see any creature near her. The strong tide of the waves created a very cold breeze that made her shiver and freeze. Her teeth and body were frozen as a result of the cold weather. Her teeth chattered loudly over and over again. She is tired, exhausted, and her mind is confused. She is starving to death. She tried to figure out what to do, but her mind seemed to have stopped working like a human being. Her bitter experience deprived her of any human power of reasoning and made her like a two-legged animal. Worse than that, her present condition can be likened to a lifeless vegetable. Despite her miserable condition, the animal's survival instinct forced her to enter a boat and hide from the cold. Intisar found an old blanket inside that boat. The blanket was torn and full of holes and gave off a stench of pungent fishy smell. The homeless girl crept under the blanket and covered her frozen body from the freezing cold. She gathered her cold body into one part of the blanket that had fewer holes. The fugitive wife Intisar now used to sleep anywhere. Under a big car in an apartment building. Over a grave inside a spooky cemetery. In a filthy warehouse full of rats and vampire bugs. Now in a smelly fisherman's boat on the Nile River. Her fellow humanoid beasts had erased any instinct of fear from her heart. They turned her into a completely helpless, homeless animal-like female. And that smelly boat happened to be one of the famous fishermen's boats. It is owned by the most famous fisherman in the Triangle capital city of Sudan, and his name is Hajj Mustafa Wad al-Bashir. He is an old man in his late 70s. That man is the owner of the boat in which the homeless girl, Intisar, resorted to spending her third night of homelessness in the streets of Khartoum City. He is an aged man as old as the Nile River itself. He spent all his childhood, youth, manhood, and old age in the river, fishing. He always boasts that he caught more fish than the 45 million people of Sudan. Therefore, he claims he knows the river inside and out. Everything people want to know about river fishing, fish species, boat and boat maintenance, net making and repair, weather, fishing and swimming in the Blue Nile, White Nile, and Nile River, he is the right authority to go to. Besides, he has many legends, myths, and strange stories about the river to tell his listeners. He claimed to have killed 2 large crocodiles, a hippopotamus, and a huge fire-breathing dragon. He also claimed to have seen many ghosts, ghost ships, strange lights, and many more wonders in the river at night. Moreover, he swore by God Almighty, the noble Quran, and his beloved Prophet Muhammad that he heard many voices of space alien creatures, angelic voices, and other creatures of the Nile River. For example, he heard the singing of females at the weddings of jinn with humans, the voices of heavenly angels, the crying of demons, the screams of male ghosts, and the quarrels of the virgins of heaven. That is why his relatives, friends, foes, and other fishermen called him the Son of the Nile. However, the only wondrous miracle that the Son of the Nile has not witnessed so far is the vision of the fairy, the beautiful bride of the Nile River, Al-Jinnah. Many hunters of fish claim to have seen her and described her remarkable beauty. Those who make such allegations are less than Hajj Mustafa in age, experience, and knowledge in fishing, swimming, and sailing on the river. Especially the fisherman Hajj Harun, who is 5 years younger than Hajj Mustafa in age and 10 years less in experience than him. The fisherman Hajj Harun claimed that he had many encounters and adventures with the beautiful fairy, bride of the Nile. Just a month ago, Hajj Mustafa was present at a social gathering of an old man who married an underage girl as his wife number 3 when Hajj Harun described the magnificent beauty of the bride of the Nile. The narrator spent many hours describing her unmatchable beauty and sexy body. Once he finished his story, his description became a thrilling fairy tale told in every house, street, nook, cranny, brothel, bag, mosque, school, club, and sports ground field in the capital city. As a result, the fame and greatness of the name of Hajj Harun is increasing day by day. The thing that aroused anxiety in Hajj Mustafa's heart was that he might lose his honorific title, Ibn al-Nil, if he did not have such an encounter with the beautiful, legendary bride of the Nile. So, he began praying to God Almighty and his noble messenger Muhammad to grant him success in fulfilling the desire of his heart before his old age took him away and he departed to the afterlife upon his death. He also asked all his 4 wives, sons, daughters, grandchildren, relatives, friends, and good neighbors to remember him in their 5 prayers and during their fasting in the holy month of Ramadan to ask God Almighty and his holy prophet Muhammad to fulfill the satisfaction of his heart before leaving the land of the living and descending into the land of the dead to his eternal rest. 0. On that very day, Hajj Mustafa and his 4 sons came to the river at 5 o'clock in the morning. They were 1 hour late than their usual time. The delay in their arrival was caused by the Noba they attended on Saturday night. It is a type of religious dance where the participants shake and dance together holding hands while constantly chanting in unison the name of God Almighty. Alive, alive, or God is God. It is usually celebrated in honor of a child born into a family, the circumcision of a 5-year-old boy, or the female genital mutilation of a young girl. Hajj Mustafa and his 4 sons spent many hours dancing in the Noba celebration and finally enjoyed a delicious meal. As a result, they went to bed in the middle of the night. Early Sunday morning, Hajj Mustafa had great difficulty waking his 4 sons. Then the 4 brothers and their old father spent 5 minutes on their morning prayers and rushed to the river. The 4 sons are not inferior to their father in the art of hunting fish. They were also born fishermen. They inherited the profession of fishing from their father, who inherited it from his father, who got it from their great-grandfather, and so forth. Following the example of his father, Hajj Mustafa named his 4 sons after the Prophet Muhammad. May God bless him and grant him peace. Starting from oldest to youngest, they are named, respectively, Taha, Yasin, Mahmud, and Ahmed. The late grandfather named himself al-Bashir after one of the names of the founder of Islam. On Sunday morning, Hajj Mustafa Wad al-Bashir and his 4 sons presented themselves to the river to start another day of fishing. Since they were born and started in the art of fishing, they have always smelled and reeked of the pungent and strong scent of fish. That stench clings to their bodies and clothes, even if they are far from the river and its fish. There is no soap or detergent in the entire world that can rid them of that nasty pungent odor. However, they do not smell that stench in themselves, but anyone who meets them can smell it on them from a mile away. The closer they got to the river and their boat, the more intense the smell. So once that smell reaches their noses, it revives their inherited profession. Wherefore, each of them automatically went about his business. The eldest son went around the boat checking for holes or damage. The second son examined the fish baits, and the third son examined the big net. And last, the youngest son checked the pedals. The father sat down at the end of the boat and took some snuff and threw it into his big, toothless mouth. From his tower, the father watches his 4 sons. His shouting as he commands and corrects his sons can scare away all of the river's creatures, including fish and crocodiles. So, another day of hunting fish has just begun. In a short time, the boat began to move away from the riverbank. Hajj Mustafa, whose main task is to speak and shout more than to work, is still sitting on his tower at one end of the boat, holding his big stick and his prayer rosary, as he glorifies God and shouts his commands to his children. 2 of his sons drive the boat. The 2 older and younger boys sit on the other end of the boat and await their second task of casting and stretching the fishing net. The boat sails quickly, leaving the riverbank behind. Only a few faint voices of the tame and fluffy animals far away on both banks, like donkeys, camels, cows, horses, dogs, and chickens. When the boat reached the middle between the 2 banks, the son of the Nile gave his last command to his 2 sons to cast their nets, and his voice fell silent. Everything seems like everyday and routine for Hajj Mustafa and his 4 sons. Their work on the Nile has become so routine that they can predict everything from the flight of birds over their heads to the number of fish under their boat. So, everything is part of their daily lives and nothing new captures their curiosity. They know when they eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner without looking at their wrist watches. 6 days a week, they do the same routine except on Friday when they take the day off. On Fridays, they go to the biggest mosque in Khartoum City, which is called Al-Nilian Masjid, for public prayer, and spend the rest of the holiday either at home or visiting their relatives or friends. When Hajj Mustafa was satisfied with the performance of his sons, he decided to take his nap. Usually, the siesta is between breakfast and lunch, but that day, because of the religious dance called Noba the night before the Hajj, felt very sleepy and went down to take a nap. Without looking at the old blanket, he reached out his right hand and pulled it. Since he bought it many years ago, the blanket did not resist its owner until that day. Hajj Mustafa looked at it and tried again with both hands. Although he had made small progress, the blanket had not yet yielded to him. Then the son of the Nile rebuked the accursed Satan, the devil, and tried for the 3rd time with all his might. Unfortunately, this time Hajj Mustafa fell on his back due to the strong pull that caused the blanket to be torn in 2. Before he could stand on his feet, he saw with his own eyes what made every hair on his body stand up. He is old and bald, and there is not a single hair on his big head. However, the rest of his body is full of hair, as if he is a human who became a werewolf. Then the blanket stood up like a living thing. The standing blanket has become a human figure. The human form manifested itself as a beautiful girl. The young, beautiful fairy became the bride of the Nile. This is how Hajj Mustafa interpreted his first vision of the legendary bride of the Nile, Al-Jinniyah. Her face shines like the sun. Her eyes are large, and at the end of the 2 corners are black and narrow eyelashes. One eye is green and the other eye is pink, like the white-skinned daughter of European Christian infidels. Her long blonde hair reached down to her feet. Her apple-colored cheeks reflected the sun's rays like bright gold. When she smiles, her teeth become whiter, like milk. Her neck is as long as a bottle of ghee. Her breasts are like 2 large pomegranates, and her rosy cheeks are like 2 fresh apples. Her sweet lips are like 2 pieces of fresh pineapple. Her eyebrows are black and semicircular like new crescents. Her waist is very narrow. Her legs are even, bright, and shine like gold. Her buttocks are large and slightly pushed up. Her nose is straight. She is like the nose of the Egyptian Queen Cleopatra. She also resembles in her marvelous beauty the queen of the king Nimrod, Semiramis. She is adorned in a beautiful sparkly white dress. Her beautiful dress held onto her body, which clearly revealed her inner charm figure. Her transparent white dress reveals her small pink underwear and bra. From the top of her head to the bottom of her feet, she looks like an Indian heroine in a hit Bollywood movie. And she is white, like a Russian girl. There is a beautiful small round black mole on her left cheek. When she smiles, her face reveals a beautiful dimple on her right cheek. Sometimes she smiles and other times she laughs. She is adorned with gold and diamonds from the top of her head to the toes of her feet. She wears a gold watch on her right wrist and a white ring on her left hand. Her ring is made of ivory. She has another gold earring on her left nose. Her nose jewel is larger than the ring on her finger. Her neck is decorated with a long chain of pure gold. The chain reaches her navel. The chain carries a golden crescent at its end. Inside the crescent is the Star of King David. She has another large golden necklace around her beautiful neck. She has many bangles on her hands, bracelets on her legs, earrings on her ears, anklets around her ankles. They are all made of pure gold. Around her head is a golden tiara, and on her neck a wreath of pure gold. On her head, she also wears a big crown of gold. When she speaks, her voice is as soft as music. It is as sweet as a cuckoo bird or a nightingale. When she sings, her songs are similar to those of the legendary Indian singer Lata. She dances as an Indian heroine dances in Bollywood films. In short, Ibn al-Nil, or the son of the Nile River, spent hours and hours describing his first vision of the latest manifestation of the legendary beautiful bride of the Nile, Al-Jinniyah. This is how Hajj Mustafa later described the fairy queen of the water, who is like the fish-born girl who became Queen Semiramis to his relatives and friends. The only thing he couldn't describe was her shoes. He swore by God and his infallible messenger Muhammad, and by divorcing his 4 wives, that she was barefoot. Yet this is the only thing his opponents hold against him. Hajj Haroun is the first competitor to object to Hajj Mustafa's description of the beautiful fairy, bride of the Nile. He always mentioned the shoes of the legendary beautiful bride in his description. He often claims that whenever Al-Jinniyah appeared to him, he saw her shoes sometimes made of shiny glass and at other times pure gold. Despite this big claim and the long description of the fairy queen Al-Jinniyah, the bride of the Nile, that particular morning, Ibn al-Nil did not act or react normally, as he later told his relatives, friends, and enemies. When the blanket stood up and transformed into a beautiful girl and the supposed bride of the Nile appeared before him with bones and flesh, the old man cried out loudly, "Al-Jinniyah, Al-Jinniyah," or the fairy queen of the Nile River, the fairy bride of the river. His loud cries terrified every living being in the river, especially his 4 sons. As he later falsely claimed, the frightened Hajj Mustafa could not stand on his feet. He kept falling on the boat and went on shouting like a fire alarm over and over the name of the beautiful bride of the Nile. He was even more afraid of the 2 teenage girls who saw Intisar sleeping on the grave of her late sister Firdos and mistook her for a resurrected female zombie Al-Baisha. The first 2 boys to respond to their father's fear were the ones driving the boat. These 2 sons did not see the girl standing before their naked eyes as a beautiful fairy queen of the Nile, but rather as a kind of demonic female incarnation of a sort. Her sudden appearance before their eyes and her disheveled hair, her tired eyes, and her tight, short, dirty dress revealed to them a demonic female creature who had come to destroy them all. They both let go of the pedals and jumped into the waters of the river. The youngest and eldest sons also see the girl as an evil female creature that has manifested herself and is about to harm them. Their suspicions were confirmed when they saw her standing without shoes. They also dived into the water and swam to the shore. This was how the 4 frightened sons escaped and were left behind in their boat by the old father alone to face the devil's evil wife. Therefore, Father Hajj Mustafa was left alone with the fairy, the beautiful bride of the Nile River. According to his story, which he later told his friends and foes, he sat on his boat and had a heart-to-heart talk with her. It was a long, peaceful, face-to-face conversation with the beautiful fairy girl, the Bride of the Nile. Whatever his fairy tale was, the truth was not like that. When the homeless and runaway girl, Intisar, got up from her sleep and saw Hajj Mustafa and his 4 sons, she became very frightened. She started trembling with fear, dread, and panic. When she saw the reaction of the 4 sons who were afraid of her and jumped into the water, she was afraid that their father would hold her accountable for their fears and drowning and try to kill her. To avoid being slain in another honor killing like the one she faced at the gate of the military base, the fugitive wife fell to her knees and began to ask for forgiveness and mercy. But in that, the hated and oppressed girl who was horribly abused was wrong because Hajj Mustafa also fell on his face and fainted due to the great terror that filled his heart at her sudden appearance before his old eyes. His heart lost a few beats and his mind stopped working for a few seconds. His whole body was paralyzed. When his departed soul somehow returned to his decrepit body and revived him to life, he began to sweat, shiver, and shake like a 90-year-old Asian man. Then his loud cries for help began. The frightened man might have cried out with his lungs to death if the fairy queen of the Nile had not fallen to her knees and begged him for mercy as well. And at that difficult time, he needed her mercy more than she wanted it from him. The Bride of the Nile's sudden move towards him caused the frightened old geezer to fall on his stomach and face. He passed out and became like the lifeless carcass of a crocodile or a decrepit old man transformed into a dead corpse, ready for his funeral and burial. Chapter 52. Divine Bells Ring in Heaven. The alleged disobedient Muslim wife, Intisar, concluded that the old sheikh had died out of fear of her, and his 4 sons drowned in the water and died as well. This realization made her feel incredibly guilty, deeply saddened, heartbroken, and trouble in her conscience. She looked around and saw the boat running fast towards the bank, driven by the force of the current. Her mind is still clouded by the bitter experience of rape she had at the home of the lustful military major. She tried to find a way to escape from her dire circumstances, but she couldn't. Intisar remembered the Imam's prophetic words, "You ran away from one man, and you want to be the woman of many men." She understood from her bitter experience of 3 days in Khartoum City that his words were like an inescapable satanic prophecy, and that her kismet in life had destined her to fulfill it. If she is to continue living in this cosmopolitan city of Sudan, she will sooner or later be forced into adultery, slavery, or prostitution. The only alternative is to return to the city of Gadaref and submit to her alleged Muslim husband, the evil and selfish boy Hassan Majub al-Hilali. When the fugitive wife Intisar thought of such a possibility, she trembled with fear and felt resentment and disgust. She knew and understood that a lifelong association with that selfish husband would be a more painful humiliation than prostitution and slavery. She will be raped every day by a person she hates, and she holds him responsible for destroying her family, killing her sister Fertus, and causing the suicidal death of her brother Osman. And the main reason behind her separation from the only person she loves in her life. Seeing all the doors of hope closed on her face, the 3rd innocent girl, Intisar, finally reaches the inevitable alternative. Suicide became the only available solution to her endless misery and suffering. Therefore, the 17-year-old fugitive and homeless girl, who is legally wanted by the verdict of obedience, decided to end her life. She found the river's water surrounding her everywhere. She got to her feet and walked towards the edge of the old boat. She knows there is no one nearby to save her if she calls for help. Then she reached the edge of the boat and climbed onto it. Intisar stood hesitating for a while and then jumped out of the boat. She expected that her body would sink into the water. As she expected, she would struggle for a while and then die. She knows she can't swim because she had never learned to swim in her city. This is because Muslim girls are not allowed to practice any kinds of sports or learn swimming. However, Intisar was surprised by the fact that the boat had now reached the other muddy bank. Instead of drowning and ending it all, she hit her feet in the muddy water and sank to her ankles. Intisar quickly stood up. She found that the muddy water could only reach lower than her knees. She has a chance to return to the riverbank and save herself. Yet she remained determined and blinded by her fateful decision of suicide. She once again chose to die rather than continue living in her miserable condition. She started walking into the water towards the depth. This side of the riverbank is deserted and devoid of any human beings. Just like the wilderness of the cemetery of Al-Ad Sharif near the brothel of the pimp lady Nafisa. Intisar knows that only God will witness her suicide. She remembered her creator for the first time since escaping out of her city Gadarif. She said to herself, "Isn't God the one who gave the Sharia court judge the authority to issue the verdict of obedience against her as supposedly disobedient Muslim wife? Is it not God who allowed their older brother Omar as their guardian to sell them as two wives in halal Islamic marriages? He sold her along with her innocent sister Firdaus as sex slaves to the two evil conspirators, Osman al-Tayyib and Hassan Majub al-Halali? Wasn't God the one who allowed the policeman to kidnap her underage younger sister Firdaus from her home and take her to the evil old sheikh Osman Satan al-Tayyib who imprisoned her, beat her, and raped her to death?" Accordingly, the third innocent girl, Intisar, held God responsible for the kidnapping, rape, and murder of her late innocent sister Firdaus, the suicide of her brother Osman, her separation from her lover Sami, her bitter experience of roaming without shelter, money, or shoes in the streets of Khartoum City, the two houses in which she was subjected to brutal rape, and her suicidal death today as well. As a result of that reasoning and deduction, Intisar became very angry with God. She challenged him to dare stop her from killing herself and ending her misery and suffering. With these bold words that came out of her mouth and the strong suicidal thoughts inside her mind, the homeless and fleeing girl, Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir, reached the end of her life. Then, with eyes blinded by so many tears, a bleeding heart, and a troubled mind, she plunged deeper and deeper into the water. With each step she took further into the depth, the water like a hungry giant began to swallow her tender body. Her pure soul slowly began to rise from her holy body. Each step forward took her farther and farther from the land of the living and brought her closer and closer to the land of the dead. When only her neck and head remained above the surface of the water, Intisar stopped walking. Her heart is beating fast. Her mind has stopped working. Her end has come. Water covered every part of her body except for the head. Only one step separates her between the living and the dead. Then she raised her right leg and was about to bring it forward. At that critical moment in her life, Intisar suddenly began to hear a loud ringing of bells. Her right leg was suspended for some time. Her soul is now hanging between heaven and earth. The stillness of the water echoed the ringing of bells and made them very loud. At first Intisar thought that bells were ringing in the sky above her. Angels ring the bells of heaven and welcome the advent of her spirit. She raised her face to the sky and looked. She saw a clear sky illuminated by the bright rays of the morning sun. She didn't see anyone there sitting on his throne in heaven. There is neither God nor angel in the sky except the flying birds sending down their excrements. The bells keep ringing. The sound of the bells is her last anchor of hope. She put her right leg back and continued to listen to the bells ringing. Confusion left her mind. She is starting to think properly. The ringing of bells entered a flash of light in her darkened mind and created a ray of hope in her troubled heart. The flood of tears stopped. She felt as if a heavenly hand was reaching out from above, holding onto her and preventing her from committing suicide. At that critical moment of losing everything in life and not finding hope, Intisar began to think about the source of the ringing bells. She jumped back and turned her body. Then she started walking towards the riverbank. The more she walks, the louder, clearer, and closer the resonance of the bells becomes. When half of her body became visible above the surface of the water, the fleeing Muslim wife discovered the source of the ringing of the bells. To her unbelievable and unpleasant surprise, it came from a church. A Christian church. She could clearly see a huge cross on top of that church. The Muslim girl Intisar turned into a statue. She is now in a fixed state. She found herself in a difficult dilemma again. It is even more difficult than the two previous bewilderments she faced at the gate of the military base and the house of slavery of the cruel wife Mrs. Senesney. In the first case, the dilemma forced her to choose between the angry mob's stones and the bullets of the two soldiers. In the second dilemma, she was forced to choose between servitude of slavery in the major's house and a life of prostitution on the streets of Khartoum City. In both cases, she chose the lesser of the two evils. Now the choice is between suicide or going to church. They are two choices she doesn't love either. She would either continue to follow the sound of the bells ringing and go to a Christian church or return to the deep water and bury her body underneath. The runaway Muslim wife who became a homeless girl on the streets of Khartoum City would have chosen anything at that difficult moment but church. This is where she was taught at home and school that a Muslim girl from childhood must hate with an undivided heart. She is supposed to hate this place of worship of misguided Christian infidels bitterly. She never passed a Christian church in her city Gedaref without spitting on it 7 times on it. Even when she was passing near the cemetery or graves of Christians, she used to curse their dead. She was told in her Islamic community that the Jews are a race cursed by God and the Christians are misguided people. As infidels and enemies of God, they are both brothers of the monkeys and pigs. So how can she go now to where the church of the Christian infidels is? And if the biggest mosque of the Muslims in her country could not solve its problem, then how can the infidels' church present a solution to its intractable problem? These are the two puzzling questions that prevented the Muslim girl, Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir, from moving forward. She has to choose between God and Satan, Islamic faith and Christian disbelief, Muslims and Christians, and Islam and Christianity. Her heart chose to remain faithful to her true Islamic religion, but nevertheless her mind told her to go to that Christian church and ask for help. In fact, Intisar is like a drowning young woman grasping at a straw if it can save her life. Eventually, with her tragic heart, darkened mind, and bleeding conscience, the Muslim girl decided to take on the ultimate challenge and enter the Christian church. With heavy legs and bare feet, she resumed her walk towards the temple of the infidels. Intisar does not have the same feeling of confidence she had felt when she walked towards the Grand Mosque last Friday afternoon. Only her body moved forward, but her mind and heart remained rooted in that spot on the riverbank. And yet she feels again in the depths of her soul that she is not walking aimlessly, but towards a goal stretched out and as clear as the bright sun of Sunday morning. She knew it is the day of worship for the Christian infidels. She got out of the water onto the muddy riverbank. She was barefoot and bleeding profusely from stones cut and thorns stabbed. Her dress and underwear are wet and full of mud and dirt. Her hair is ruffled and wet, too. Her nose still smelled of fish and mud. Her face is still swollen from the harsh slaps of the cruel wife of the major who attempted to rape her. Miserable she is. She looks so frightened and miserable. Even beggars may not like to approach her. She looks like a lunatic young woman who escaped from her cell in a mental hospital. Nevertheless, Intisar still appears like a lotus flower, which has preserved her beauty and dignity, although she lived for a while in those morally bad houses. Therefore, in her miserable condition, the Muslim girl decided to go to the place of Christian worship. The runaway wife arrived at the door of the church with mixed whims and emotions. Her mind was filled with strong feelings of contradiction. Her heart is controlled by an ambivalent state. She hates with passion the place she came to for help and shelter, and loves the ringing of the bells that prevented her from committing suicide. Despite this, the fugitive Muslim girl Intisar knew and understood that in her current painful situation, even if the devil stood in front of her with his horns and offered help, she would accept it from his hands. She paused for a while before entering the empty church complex. She can't see any person anywhere. Now the bells stopped ringing and silence filled the church. Intisar hesitated. She should either go further inside the church or scold Satan who deceived her and brought her to this infidel place of worship and then left her and went away. Something in the depths of her soul forced her to move on. But where should she go next? Suddenly, she began to hear many people singing. Intisar wondered if she had come to a place of worship or a wedding hall. She turned her head to where the choir singing was coming from to her ears. At last, she saw a large, spacious hall. She walked towards it. When she reached the entrance, she saw many people standing in rows with books in their hands. Then the homeless Muslim girl Intisar climbed over the steps and entered the prayer sanctuary and sat quietly in the last seat of the pews. She felt like a thief who came to the wrong house to steal, or a burglar who broke into a demon-haunted old castle inhabited by scary ghosts. No one saw her except the man standing in front on a platform. The man's face was neither angry nor surprised when he saw her. He looked at her and then turned his face to his congregation. The Muslim girl, Intisar, expected that the priest of the church would be an old man with a long beard and black clothes. He holds in his left hand a big red book called the Injil and walks through the streets with a gloomy and sad face. But the man she sees now is different from the image of the priest she stored in her memory. Many times, she saw a church priest in her city Al-Gadarif with these descriptions. This man is wearing a plain dress. Nothing sets him apart from the rest of the infidel worshippers. Intisar's attention turned from the priest to the Christians. She saw them as men and women and their children. She wondered how teenage girls and other beautiful women were allowed to enter the infidels' place of worship and stand shoulder to shoulder with men. How can a man focus on worship when a girl or a young woman is standing next to him? The Muslim girl remembered that the guard of the Grand Mosque in Khartoum City told her that the Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace, had categorically forbade women from entering the mosque. Moreover, she studied in the school's Islamic education class that her prophet also said that the presence of a woman invalidates the man's prayer. Accordingly, how can these infidels allow their females to stand with them in the same hall, shoulder to shoulder, and claim that they will worship the holy God? Before she can find an answer to her question, she gets distracted when she sees a group of teenage boys and girls who come to the pulpit and start singing. The silence again turned into the singing of a chorus. Everyone sings. Intisar couldn't follow the lyrics at first. She is very tired and starving. After singing some hymns, the priest delivered his sermon and the service ended. Although he spoke in Arabic, the Muslim girl could not understand a single word of it, as if he spoke in Latin. Then the Christians started leaving the prayer sanctuary. Some of them looked at her and smiled at her. The majority of them walked by her without even looking at her or speaking to her. No one approached her or shook her hand. Intisar felt like a dirty piece of clothing that had fallen from a passing garbage truck. Then she compared her dirty and tattered dress to their beautiful clothes. She concluded that they view her as a dirty Muslim girl who should not be approached or touched, or an outcast Hindu girl. Then she was forced to compare these infidel Christians on the Sunday of their day of worship to the faithful Muslim men whom she had seen coming out of the great mosque last Friday afternoon. None of them showed pity or cared to help her when the imam's bodyguards pushed her until she fell to the ground and hit her face and exposed her buttocks and underwear. Although many of them had heard her conversation with their virtuous imam, none of them offered to help her with a few coins or take her to his house and give her shelter and food. If anyone had done that, she would not have fallen prey to that evil pimp lady who is called the Mother Nafisa, or become a lowly slave and raped in the house of the lustful military major. Intisar understood that the only wise words that the despicable Mother Nafisa had taught her was that all religious people are hypocrites whether they are Muslims, Christians, or Jews. These imams, priests, and rabbis love to preach to people but do nothing to help them. So, the homeless Muslim girl concluded that she didn't learn her lesson properly, which is why she once again reached the wrong place of worship and the wrong worshippers of God. Frustrated and very disappointed, the so-called disobedient Muslim wife gathered her strength, rose to her feet, and began to walk out of the church prayer hall. Once again, the diabolical thought of suicide took possession of her mind. However, as she came out of the entrance door, the homeless Muslim girl saw someone running after her and saying in a loud voice, "Please, miss, don't go until you meet me." She saw the priests and with a big smile on his face he is approaching her. He extended his right hand to shake hands and say hello to her. She gave him her dirty hand. The priest shook her hand very gently while holding her dirty hand with both hands. The fugitive Muslim wife saw a woman, a girl, and a boy with him. Chapter 53. The fugitive Muslim wife finds refuge in a Christian home. As soon as he shook her hand, the priest began to introduce himself and his family to the new Muslim female visitor of their Christian church. "I'm Pastor Mata Hannah," the religious leader says politely. "What is your name, my dear daughter?" "My name is Intisar Ibrahim Mustafa Jabir," the unexpected visitor girl says quietly. "This is my wife, Sarah Hannah." "Hello, my dear daughter Intisar," says the wife. "Thank you, madam. This is my daughter Susan, and this is my son Naji." Intisar shook hands with the son and daughter of the priest. Susan is a girl about her age. Naji is 22 years old. The Muslim girl felt that Pastor Mata and his family were happy to meet her. "Oh, my beloved daughter, Intisar, welcome to our home," says Mrs. Mata. "Yes, we invite you to lunch at our house," says Reverend Mata. The homeless Muslim girl didn't say anything but gave a faint smile and a downward look. "Yes, Papa," she agreed to the invitation to have lunch at our house today, the Coptic daughter says happily. "My daughter Susan, please take your sister Intisar to the car. Your mother Sarah and I will follow in a few minutes." As they walked towards the family's car, the Muslim girl looked carefully at the Christian girl. She saw her as a beautiful Coptic girl. Her eyes are green and her hair is blonde, as if she is a white girl. She is wearing blue jeans and a white shirt. Intisar was impressed by her beauty, but she didn't like her clothes. The Muslim girl does not like a girl to dress like a boy. She believes that shirts and pants are made for men, not women. She never put on a man's clothes, except on the day of her nocturnal escape. Salah persuaded her to dress as a boy in order to fool Hassan's 3 spies and make a safe escape. Suzanne is shorter than Intisar. Despite her dirty rags on her soiled body, the Muslim girl compared her beauty to that of the Christian girl and found herself much prettier. But Intisar finds that Suzanne has a happy, smiling face which she lacks. More than that, nothing in the Christian girl might make the Muslim girl feel inferior to her new sister. Once they got to the car, Naji started the engine. The beautiful Coptic girl asked the beautiful Arab girl to enter first. Then Susan walked in and sat down next to her. The Muslim girl was surprised by the friendly nature of the Christian girl. She had expected that the Coptic girl would avoid sitting near her because of her dirty, wet, and smelly clothes. Her clothes smell worse than sewage. Intisar herself felt stinking with a mixture of fish, dirty mud, and sweat. After a few minutes, Reverend Mata and his wife, Sarah, came and occupied the 2 seats in the middle. Intisar and Susan are sitting in the back seats. Naji drives the family car. As the car left the church and started running along Nile Street, Intisar looked out and into the river and envisioned herself in the deep water, a dead body gone forever. Her tears fell like raindrops from her beautiful eyes. She asked herself why she must suffer so much, though she did not commit any crime, except that she fell in love with a rich boy and wanted him to be her marital companion in her journey in life. Why is the world full of evil, selfish, and dangerous people? She knows she can't answer her question. She also understood that no one could answer this question except her Creator. He is the one who revealed these Islamic laws at the hands of his infallible Prophet Muhammad and committed them to about 2 billion Muslims. While the car was still racing with other cars along the riverbank, Intisar asked herself again how long the priest and his family would keep her in their home. She expected them to only hold her for an hour or 2 and then tell her to go back to where she came from. She tried to look at her future after those hours in the Christian home. But she predicted a dangerous future with uncertainty and lack of hope. And she wonders if she should share her tragic life story with these Christians. How can she trust the infidels? She was made to believe from childhood that the Jews and Christians are infidels and enemies of God and his Prophet Muhammad and hate Islam and Muslims. Therefore, she concluded that she cannot trust infidel people who hate her religion and Muslim people. Then the Muslim girl turns her attention to the Coptic boy Naji for the first time. She remembered the image of his face when she saw him in the church. He is young, handsome, and happy. He has that smiling face which seems to be a common feature of the Coptic family. Intisar wondered if he had a girlfriend or not. Then she remembered her handsome boyfriend. What would have happened to her lover Sammy if she committed suicide? Intisar expected sadness to fill his heart when he knew her tragic and sad end. This Sunday will be a dark day for him. He may kill himself like Romeo killed himself when he learned that his beloved Juliet killed herself, or he might become a mad lover like Kais, who became madman when he couldn't marry his beloved girl of his life dreams, Layla. Will he build a great shrine for her, as the beautiful Sudanese girl Tajij has a shrine of love in Kassala city which lovers visit up to this day? Or will he build a dome for her like the Taj Mahal palace shrine that was ordered by Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan to house the tomb of his favorite wife, Mumtaz Mahal? Or he may live the rest of his sad life with a broken heart over losing the only girl he loves in his life. Intisar knows that her lover, Sammy, is still in prison. He went to jail because of his unwavering love for her. The same wicked religious man who claimed to be a just judge caused her late sister to be kidnapped, raped, and murdered imprisoned her lover and banished her from her home and city. Because of him and because of the evil old man's gang, she became a homeless, fugitive, beggar, whore, maidservant, sex slave, and helpless girl who fell victim to 2 attempted rapes by 2 evil men in the city of Khartoum and even attempted suicide. At the end of her flight and vagrancy, she was forced to enter a place of worship for the infidels and seek help in a Christian home. Had it not been for her desperate situation, she would not have entered the Church of Infidel Christians, even if she had been forced to starve to death in the streets of the triangle capital of Sudan. She knows that any other Muslim girl in her place would choose to become a prostitute in a brothel or a slave in a house of slavery or starve in the streets and die like a stray dog rather than go to a Christian church and a Coptic home. Anyway, after a long drive, the car stopped in front of a large gate. Someone, likely the valet, has opened the gate and the car entered. Intisar saw a beautiful house filled with many flowers, roses, and other plants of different colors. When she went down and followed the Christian family inside, the Muslim girl found their house very beautiful. She compared it to the brothel of the procuring Nafisa and the place of residence of the Major Sinisni and his cruel wife. It is more beautiful than the first house, but less beautiful than the second home. Then the Coptic girl took the new girl to her room. Susan's room is very clean. It is decorated with many beautiful drawings and pictures hanging on the wall. The friendly Christian girl says happily to her Muslim guest, "Welcome, Intisar, to my humble little room. Please sit back, relax, and feel at home." "Thank you, Suzanne," Intisar says in a low, sad voice. Then she adds, "You are a very nice girl, Susan, but I feel I will make your clean room dirty if I sit on a chair or the bed. Better for me to sit on the floor." When the homeless Muslim girl said those words, she went and sat down on a green carpet near a large armchair. Immediately, the Christian girl Suzanne ran towards her and hugged her tightly. A few tears fell from her beautiful eyes. Then she spoke a few words and almost cried. Susan says, "It's impossible, dear Intisar, you can't sit like this. I know you are going through a difficult time, but all of us humans sometimes go through hard times in our lives. Now, I don't want to bother you with that." Then Susan grabbed Intisar's left hand and helped her to stand on her feet and assisted her to sit on the armchair. "Now tell me, my dear sister, would you rather have lunch or take a shower first?" "I haven't eaten any food in 2 days," Intisar says in a weeping voice. Tears started falling from her beautiful eyes. Susan also wiped a few tears from her lovely eyes before speaking. First, she sat in another armchair near her guest and hugged her tightly. Then she spoke while crying. "Intisar, you're a very young and beautiful girl. Life shouldn't treat a girl of your age so harshly. Please come and lie on my bed. I will bring you enough delicious food for you to eat." When Susan had spoken these kind words, she took her new sister's hand and led her to her bed. After that, the Christian girl left her room and went to get something for her Muslim guest to eat. Until now, Intisar felt that she had been treated kindly by the loving Coptic family. However, her doubts rose again in her mind, which made her ask herself what would happen to her next. Will she be asked to leave the house once she is fed? Or will she be allowed to stay, and then at night one of the males, either the father or his son, will try to rape her? Before she could find an answer to her troubling questions, the Coptic girl returned. Then Susan had brought a large tray of food in her hands. She put the tray on a table and invited her new guest to eat. The homeless girl Intisar was like a hungry dog who starved for 2 days. Therefore, she immediately attacked the food and started satiating her hunger and filling her empty stomach. Susan pretended to be busy tidying up her room. She intentionally does not want to look at Intisar as she eats with both hands. The good Coptic girl Susan is not as rude as the jealous girl Mona, who told the new girl Intisar in the brothel she had eaten like a jungle girl in the woods. When she looked at the dishes and found that they were completely empty, the Christian girl left her room and soon returned with a second helping of the hungry Muslim girl. This time Susan brought almost twice as much food as before. Intisar also completely finished the second assist, and when she saw Susan want to leave the room to get a third assist, she stopped her. "Please don't bring me any more food. I am completely full now." "Do not be shy, my dear sister Intisar. We usually cook more food on Sunday in case we have some visitors from church or other relatives who live far away from our house." "No, thank you, Susan. I am completely satisfied now. Can I have a cup of tea?" "Yes, of course you can have that. I have the same habit. I drink tea after every meal." When Suzanne went to get tea, Intisar's vision became sharp again because of the delicious meal and the large amount of fresh food she had just eaten. Then she looked at the beautiful pictures hanging on the wall in front of her. Most are scenic landscapes of rural locations. But one that caught her attention was of some of the men who were sitting around a large table. It is the painting of the Last Supper of Christ and his 12 disciples by Leonardo da Vinci, but the Muslim girl did not see or know about it before. In the center, she saw an important religious leader seated with his followers and a halo of light circling around his head. Intisar has half correctly guessed that the man is the Prophet Isa al-Masih ibn Maryam, or Jesus Christ, son of the Virgin Mary. Then the Muslim girl wondered as why the Christians worship Jesus. Why they worship a man instead of God. Before the Muslim girl could continue the chain of her thoughts, the Christian girl entered with a large cup of tea in her hand. The runaway wife drank tea in silence while the Coptic girl was busy looking into her school books. When the visitor finished drinking her cup of tea, she looked at her hostess and said, "Can I take a break now?" Susan asked nicely and politely if you'd like to take a shower first and change your clothes before you take a rest. "Yes, I would love to take a shower. Please follow me." Then Suzanne took Intisar to the bathroom and gave her some of her clothes and told her to put them on after showering. After that, she returned to her Coptic family and found them waiting for her eagerly. "Did she tell you anything about herself?" Ms. Hannah asks. "She didn't say much to me except that she hadn't eaten food for the last 2 days, says Susan. "Did she at least tell you why she hasn't eaten for so long?" asks Pastor Hannah. "I think we should not bother her with any questions and wait for her to reveal her identity and her problem on her own, and in due time," Susan says. "At least we should try to find out what kind of problem she is facing." "Papa, why don't we wait until she feels at home and then tell us her problem?" says the Coptic daughter impatiently to her daddy. "My concern is that I don't want to be involved in any problem related to the Islamic law," says Reverend Hannah. "I don't think she is involved in anything illegal except as a common problem for teenage girls nowadays. Either she became pregnant with an illegitimate child before marriage, or her parents wanted to force her to marry a rich old man who had other wives and many children. This is what prompted her to flee her home and her family," says Mrs. Hannah. "Yes, Mama, it is a common problem among Muslim girls," says the son. Pastor Hannah says if that is the case, we will try to help her. But I don't think her problem is that simple. Otherwise, why did she come to the Christian church? Naji says again, "Guys, you know, if a Muslim girl enters our Christian church, it means that she is in very serious trouble." Pastor Hannah says, "I think Naji is right." Papa shouts Susan angrily at her father. Remember the story of the Good Samaritan told by the Lord Jesus in the Gospel of Luke. How did he help the wounded Jew on the road, even though the Jews considered the Samaritan and his people infidels and their sworn enemies? Pastor Hannah says to his daughter, "Of course I love helping her, even though she is a Muslim girl." The mother says, "We Christians do not consider Muslims our enemies, although they look at us in this way." Then let's not rush to a hasty conclusion. Susan says and adds, "Since the Lord has brought her to us in the church and our home, we must help her, regardless of whether her problem is serious or not." It is not a hasty decision, but we must approach the situation very carefully. You all know that if the neighbors see a Muslim girl in our house, they will conclude that we want to convert her to our religion. According to the law of this Muslim country, converting from Islam to Christianity is apostasy and serious crime and is punishable by death, says Reverend Hannah. We will not convert her to Christianity. We should try to help her because the Lord Jesus Christ has brought her to his church, says Mrs. Hannah. Yes, Mama is right, the daughter says happily. While the members of the Christian family were discussing her case, the fugitive disobedient Muslim wife, Intisar, came out of the bathroom and entered the room of the kind Christian girl, Susan. Then the Coptic daughter got up and went to her room. When she saw her and her guest in her dress, she opened her eyes and said, "Oh, Intisar, you are so beautiful, just like a superstar of the Indian cinema." "Thank you, Susan, and you are also beautiful as an Egyptian film actress." "Thank you, my dear, but still, I am not as beautiful as you. I now feel like I have stripped off my dirty clothes and cleaned my filthy body from so many days of dirt. So, I guess I'm becoming human again." "Now, my dear sister Intisar, would you like to take a break before you meet my parents and brother? Or you don't mind talking to them right away because they are eager to know more about you?" The heart of the so-called disobedient Muslim wife, who fled from the verdict of obedience and the justice of the Islamic Sharia court, was once again filled with fear, panic, and depression. But somehow she hid her negative feelings in her heart and said quietly, "The bath refreshed me. I can talk to them now." "Excellent. Please follow me to the guest room." The runaway and homeless Muslim girl walks behind the good Coptic girl with a heart full of fear. She fears that the Christian family will send her out of their home once they find out about her problem. When they reached the living room, Intisar found that the family members were busy whispering to each other, and when they saw her they fell silent. Yet their smiling faces encouraged her. Then Pastor Hannah asked the Muslim girl to sit down and feel comfortable. Reverend Hannah continues, "We are so glad to have you in our home today, my beloved daughter Intisar. Also, you're invited to visit our church every Sunday whenever you want to do so. My house is open to anyone who wants some help. So, we want to know how we can help you." "I am a Muslim girl. I am a stranger in this city." The fugitive wife begins to speak in a sad voice while she is weeping. "I am homeless, without money or relatives. I am from Gadarav city. I ran away from home because the police wanted to take me by force to live with a man I hated. The judge of the Sharia court issued an obedience verdict against me. This means that you are a married woman. Am I right, my daughter Intisar?" Pastor Hannah asks. "I am not married yet. I have a boyfriend. I love him so much and he loves me too. He was falsely accused of breaking the law and imprisoned for 1 month." "Well, please, my dear daughter Intisar, feel at ease and tell us your whole story," says Mrs. Hannah. The Coptic daughter says to her new sister, "No matter how difficult your problem is, dear Intisar, we may still try to help you." Then Susan added, "We will not allow you to starve and suffer again." The alleged disobedient Muslim wife, straying from justice, felt encouraged by the words of the kind Coptic mother and her loving Christian daughter, and therefore she recounted her love story from the time she met her lover Sammy in the cinema in Gadarav city until she attempted suicide 2 hours ago in the Nile River. She said the ringing bells of their Christian church which at the last minute stopped her from killing herself. The eyes of the Muslim girl were filled with a torrent of tears, and her voice choked several times as she told the story of her bitter tragedy. In the meantime, the Coptic girl Susan was sitting near her, and from time to time she gave her water to drink and gave her a handkerchief to wipe her tears. She also hugged the Muslim girl many times until she stopped crying. Each loving family member sheds hot tears as the runaway girl tells her tragic story. "I believe in every word you said, my beloved daughter," Intisar says Reverend Hannah. "Indeed, your tears revealed more offense and suffering than your mouth spoke. I also believe that God saved you from those evil people who tried to rape you or turn you into a prostitute and a slave girl. Moreover, the good Lord has saved you from your suicidal death and has taken you into his church and brought to his house here. That is why neither I as the servant of the loving Lord nor anyone here in this house has the right to put you back on the streets. From now on, consider our home your home and the Church of Christ your second home. My daughter Susan is your sister and my son Naji is your brother. Consider me your real father and my wife Sarah your real mother. After Reverend Hannah uttered these tender words, the fleeing Muslim girl began to shed indescribable tears of joy. Immediately the Christian girl, Susan, embraced her new Muslim sister, Intisar, while her beautiful eyes also wept tears of joy constantly.